And as you sit with the echo of that deep silence within you, something stirs, not with noise, but with presence. A flicker in the stillness. Not a sound, but a knowing. It is the soft breath of something eternal, leaning close to whisper. This is not the end of seeking. This is the beginning of remembrance. Because what you call faith is not belief in something out there, something hoped for and far away. It is the sacred act of remaining loyal to what only you can see, and no one else can verify. It is not the clinging of the desperate, but the majesty of the divine, veiled in the ordinary, burning quietly within you like an unseen lamp. Faith is not a tool. It is not leverage. It is not asking for what you want. Faith is the refusal to betray your inner vision, even when the outer world calls you mad. Most call it madness, to live in a dream not yet visible. Most build their homes on the crumbling sand of circumstance. They kneel before facts, forgetting they are but shadows cast by deeper convictions. But you, something in you has awakened enough to know, what is seen is the effect. What is unseen, imagined, felt with conviction, that is the seed, the cause, the origin of all form. To remain faithful to the unseen is to dwell in the end, not as a wish, but as your dwelling place. You do not hope, you do not strive, you do not ask. You remember what the world forgot, that reality is a mirror, and the reflection bends to your assumption, not the other way around. Do you see now why faith is so misunderstood? It is not about worthiness, not about waiting. It is not earned through effort. It is being what you have already seen, without a single grain of doubt, even when no one else can see it with you. Even when the senses scream in contradiction, and in this quiet place within, you begin to realize the gravity of this power. You recall the verse, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Not a poetic metaphor, but a spiritual law. Substance, evidence, not intangible, not ethereal, real, more real than anything your eyes could bring to you. It is the soul's allegiance to its own knowing, stronger than any circumstance, louder than any fact. Feel this now. Feel what it means to become loyal, not to your fears, not to your doubts, not to the voices that insist you be realistic, but loyal to your unseen world, which already is, and awaits only your unwavering gaze to take shape. You are not creating something new. You are not calling it forth like a beggar. You are not seeking a favor from the heavens. You are remembering the world already finished within you, and that act of remembrance, fierce, soft, and unwavering, is what the scriptures call faith. To live in the end is not to wait and see. It is to walk, speak, breathe as the one who already is. Not pretending, not acting, but being, because in the still, eternal spaces of consciousness, all things are already accomplished. Time is only the servant of your faith, and yes, your senses will challenge you. The world will test your allegiance, because it must. It is only reflecting your inner state, and when you waver, it wavers. When you believe again, it bends again, not as punishment or reward, but as law, impersonal, perfect, and just. So you are not waiting for proof. You are not asking for confirmation. You are being the proof. You are the evidence. You are the walking embodiment of what has not yet appeared, yet must appear, because you do not betray it. Notice what shifts in you as you feel this, not with effort, but with surrender, not with striving, but with rest. Feel how natural it becomes when you stop asking how, and simply return to the unseen temple within you, where it is already done. There is no work to do there, only remembrance, only loyalty, and in this loyalty, the world rearranges, not with chaos, but with grace, not with force, but with perfect inevitability, because consciousness is the only reality. What you are conscious of being, what you accept as true within, that is what you outpicture, not because it is deserved, but because it is assumed. And so we arrive at a deeper mystery, one that few dare to truly embody, one that reveals the hidden heartbeat of all miracles. But the miracle does not begin when the thing appears. It begins the moment you refuse to turn away from what only your soul can see. That instant, quiet, private, invisible to the world, is when the mountain moves, not by force, not by labor, but by alignment, by the inner marriage of imagination and faith, the unseen and the unwavering. You may not see it with the outer eye yet. The forms may still pretend to delay, but the reality has shifted, the page is turned, the seed has been accepted into the womb of consciousness, and now the whole of life must conspire to fulfill it. You do not need to manage the details, you need only stay true to the end you've chosen. This is the hidden life of the soul. Others walk by sight. You walk by knowing. They call it delusion. You call it remembrance. They call it fantasy. You call it home. You do not argue. You do not explain. You simply walk in the atmosphere of your chosen state, until the outer world can no longer contradict it. And when it bends, it will seem sudden to those who watched, but you will know it changed the moment you became loyal to it, inwardly, irrevocably, the moment you turned your gaze inward, and would not look away, not for logic, not for proof, not for permission. You chose your end, and you became it. This is not about forcing thoughts or repeating mantras. It is not about tricking the mind. It is the gentle act of falling into identity, again and again, like slipping into warm water. You let yourself feel what it would mean to be already there, already whole, already in possession, not through strain, but through assumption. And assumption is not pretending, it is being. You assume the state of the one who already has, not as a temporary performance, but as your dwelling place. This is living in the end, and every time you return to this inner atmosphere, you are planting again the seed of certainty. Can you feel it now? The shift is subtle, like the soft closing of a door behind you. You no longer peer forward with anxious hope. You look back from the fulfilled place. The longing disappears. The grasping dissolves. You are no longer on the path. You are the arrival. And yet the world outside has not caught up. That is its nature. It lags behind the inner movement. But this does not disturb you. You understand now. Reality is echo, not origin. It follows. It reflects. And though it may seem stubborn at first, it cannot resist the clarity of a being who knows who they are. Every time you turn back to the old identity, the old patterns reassemble, not to punish, but to reflect. The mirror cannot lie, it only reveals. So you take your attention as your staff, and you walk again into the inner land, into the promised state, and rest there. No pleading, no proving, just being. And the more you dwell there, the more familiar it becomes, the more natural, the more it feels like home, until you can no longer remember what it felt like to doubt, until the echo must come, because the vibration has already been set. This is the holy work, the invisible triumph. Let the weak say, I am strong, not as wishful thinking, but as spiritual fact, not because they are ignoring what they see, but because they have seen something higher. The inner word must be spoken before the outer reflects it, not just spoken aloud, but declared inwardly, accepted in silence, assumed without struggle. This is the courage most overlooked, not in action, but in stillness, not in doing, but in becoming. To look upon the barren field, and see the harvest, to stand in the desert, and feel the rain, to walk among lack and live as wealth. This is the courage of the soul faithful to its unseen kingdom. Feel now what it means to be that faithful one. Not someday, not soon, but now. Feel the air of your inner world change. The old doubts cannot follow you here. You have crossed into something eternal, and once crossed, you do not look back. But what of the moments when the world shouts louder than your knowing? What of the times when the reflection seems frozen, unmoved, unchanged? This brings us to the silent test, one so few recognize, yet one that reveals the depth of your becoming. And so when the silence deepens, when nothing stirs on the surface, and the outer world holds its breath, this is not abandonment, it is consecration. The stillness is not absence, it is the proving ground of your inner allegiance. For when all appearances seem unchanged, and yet you remain unmoved, that is when your faith becomes flesh. This is the invisible test, the sacred pause between assumption and appearance, where many abandon their vision and return to the familiar chains of fact. But you do not. You remain. You walk in the invisible garden, though the soil looks untouched. You breathe the fragrance of the unseen bloom, because you have already picked it in consciousness. Here, in this space between worlds, something ancient within you awakens. It knows this terrain. It has walked this hush before, and it whispers, not in language, but in still certainty. Hold to the end. Be loyal to the unseen. The fruit does not fail the root. The world may not applaud this kind of strength. It is not loud. It does not shout. It waits without complaint. It smiles in the face of contradiction. It nods quietly when mocked, because it knows what the others cannot yet perceive, that reality is bending already, that the promise has been planted, and the season is turning. You are not here to be convinced by appearances. You are here to convince appearances by the truth you carry in silence. When the world looks empty, your inner eye is full. When others speak of lack, you sit at the feast prepared in the presence of their doubt. You are not moved by what is. You are moved only by what you have claimed as true within. This is living in the end, not sometimes, not when convenient, but as your identity. You are no longer a seeker, you are one who has, one who is, and because you are, all things must flow toward that fulfillment, not by your effort, but by the law of consciousness, which never fails, never lies, never forgets. In this quiet knowing, you become as the root beneath the surface, unseen, yet holding all power. You do not chase the blossom, you do not beg for the harvest. You know the time must come, because the seed has been kept warm in the stillness of your faith. Even now, feel the subtle warmth of that seed within you. Do not try to force it open. Let it remain wrapped in the invisible soil of your assumption. Your work is not to rush the bloom. Your work is to remain in the end, loyal, faithful, inwardly surrendered to its inevitable becoming. You do not perform. You do not announce. You simply are. You walk the world as the one who knows, and the world cannot help but bow in response. For consciousness outpictures itself. Not sometimes, always. You will not see it until you no longer need to, because the moment you fully are the thing, the desire disappears, fulfilled already in your being. And this is the great paradox. Only those who no longer need the world to change are the ones through whom the world changes entirely, because their change was not outer, but inner, not of circumstance, but of self. So let others look and wait and wonder. You go within, you abide in the holy echo of what already is, and when the outer form finally bends to kiss the shape of your inner knowing, it will not surprise you. It will feel natural, inevitable, as if it had always been, because in truth it had always been. It was waiting for you to assume it fully, to become it without apology or question. The only delay was the time it took to claim what was already yours, not by effort, but by being. This is the still fire that consumes doubt. This is the sacred hush that precedes transformation. And here, in the quiet between breaths, a deeper question arises, not from fear, but from the trembling edge of your next becoming. And as that question hums in the silence, not with words, but with a sacred weight, you feel it land inside you like a stone sinking gently into still water. Who am I, now that I no longer wait? Who am I, if I no longer seek the thing, but am the one who holds it? The question does not demand an answer, it draws one out from the depths of your being, because to live in the end is not just to imagine the thing achieved, it is to become the self for whom the desire was always a memory, not a hope. It is to wear the identity as your own flesh, not a costume, but a second birth. You are not playing a role, you are uncovering your true face. What if the desire was never something to chase, but something to remember? What if your yearning was the echo of something already complete? You do not want the thing for its own sake, you want the feeling of being the one who has it. And when that feeling becomes real, stable, assumed, then the thing itself must come, for it can no longer be withheld from its own embodiment. This is the mystery that collapses time. You stop waiting, and you begin remembering. You stop becoming, and you be. Not through force, but through surrender. Not by accumulating, but by identifying. Be still and know that I am God. The knowing arises in stillness, and in the knowing, the identity is claimed. So you no longer ask, when will it come? You know the question belongs to the one who has not yet arrived, and you are no longer that. You have taken up residence in the end, and so the journey is over. Even as the footsteps continue, you walk the same streets, speak the same words, but everything breathes differently, for you are different, and because you are different, all things must reflect it. It is not arrogance, it is innocence, a holy forgetting of lack. You no longer beg, you no longer plead, you simply dwell, as naturally as a tree stands in its place. There is no need to prove what is rooted. There is only the silent confidence of one who belongs. And yes, the world may still appear unchanged, but this no longer stirs you, because now, you understand the nature of the mirror. You do not shout at the reflection, you change the stance, the face, the posture within, and as you do, the echo shifts. So let the image lag, let the outer still pretend. It is only the shadow catching up to the light you now embody. You have already crossed the threshold in spirit, and this is the only true crossing. Feel what this means. Not someday, not when it is visible, but now. You are the one who has, you are the one who is, and even as the evidence waits to bloom, you are already living in its fragrance. Your inner temple is full, your table is set, and though the eyes may not yet see, the soul feasts in quiet joy. And here is where faith becomes more than belief. It becomes identity, not a tool to get, but a truth to be. You are not trying to create your reality. You are remembering it through the fidelity of your inner state. Faith is not effort, it is loyalty, and loyalty does not waver when the outer picture falters. You are not swayed. You are not seduced by appearances. You have seen the end, and you have called it home. So let the winds blow, let the forms delay. They cannot touch what has already shifted within. But now, in the still hush of your recognition, something deeper begins to rise. Not desire, not effort, but the faint glimmer of a new kind of peace, the kind that comes not from getting, but from remembering who you have always been. And as that peace settles in, not as a reward, but as a remembrance, you begin to see why the outer world once felt so heavy. It was not the world itself, but the burden of forgetting. The struggle came not from life, but from the false belief that you were separate from what you longed for. Now the veil thins, and you behold yourself, not the striving version, not the waiting version, but the one who is. And in this stillness, something ancient stirs, a holiness not bound to religion, but to being, a presence that speaks without words, declaring softly, you are already whole, you are already the answer to the question you once asked, and the longing that once stretched through time, now folds into presence. It has nowhere else to go. You have arrived. It becomes clear that the outer manifestation was never the destination. It was only the echo, the shadow cast by the light of your self-knowing. What mattered was not the thing, but the self you chose to become in knowing it was already yours. That self, silent, sure, undisturbed, is the true treasure. The object, when it comes, will simply mirror the state already claimed. So you no longer grasp, you no longer grist, you no longer reach. You rest in the Sabbath of assumption, in the sacred repose of a consciousness that has accepted its inheritance. The desire has served its purpose. It called you back to your identity. And now, in the absence of striving, in the end of effort, the law goes to work. This is the hidden meaning behind. It is done, not as a declaration to force the outer into submission, but as the quiet truth of the one who lives from the fulfilled place. There is no urgency in that phrase, no anxiety, only a soft finality. The door has been closed on the old state, and the new has become flesh and consciousness. It moves through you gently, this awareness, like water shaping the shore. It smooths the last edges of resistance. You begin to notice that everything around you bends more easily now. The conversations shift, the atmosphere softens, life listens, because you are no longer speaking from lack. You don't have to explain this to anyone. You don't have to defend it. Sacred things are not argued, they are lived, and your life now becomes the sermon, not a performance, but a quiet testimony that what is felt within must be reflected without. You need no sign, for you are the sign. The evidence is already in your tone, your presence, your way of being. And when others ask, perhaps with wonder or doubt, how it came to pass, you will answer without explanation. You will smile gently, and say only, I remained loyal to what I saw within. You will not need to convince them. Their own desires will awaken. Their own mirror will begin to stir. This is how the world transforms, not through mass persuasion, but through the quiet courage of a single soul, who refuses to abandon the unseen. You are that soul. You have crossed into a realm where no doubt can follow, because you no longer dwell in the house of delay. You live in the end, and it is good. Feel how that end holds you now, not as a future point, but as a present embrace. You walk through familiar places, but they feel different. The light bends around you with new meaning. Even the smallest moment carries a hum of fulfillment, because you no longer wait for the promise. You live as the promised one. And just as the seed knows not how it blooms, yet it blooms, so too will your world unfurl around you, without strain, without struggle, guided only by the silent insistence of what you have assumed to be true. But there is a still deeper mystery hidden beneath this ease, one that reveals not just how reality conforms, but why. And as that deeper question rises from within, the quiet wondering not of doubt, but of revelation, you begin to sense it. Reality does not shape itself around your desire arbitrarily. It conforms because you are its origin. The outer is not responding to your words, but to your state. Not your effort, but your being.
the how fades into insignificance when you remember the who. The outer world is not your master, it is your mirror. It does not lead, you do. It only ever follows the tones of your inner being, and when that tone is changed, not by force but by surrender, the world cannot help but echo it. This is why it must conform, not because of a technique, not because of repetition, but because of law, eternal, unfailing, impersonal in its perfection. And here, the deeper mystery begins to unveil itself. Reality bends not because you convince it to, but because it was always yours to command, not with arrogance, not with aggression, but with sacred remembrance. You are not the servant of appearances, you are the operant power. This is the truth most overlook in their seeking. They believe they must chase the world, please it, persuade it, earn from it what was never given, but the truth is the opposite. The world is waiting on you. It stands still until you assume, it remains unformed until you embody. Ye shall decree a thing, and it shall be established unto thee, not through hoping, not through waiting, but through decree, through assumption so complete it no longer feels like a wish, but like a fact beyond question. A decree is not loud, it is not frantic, it is quiet, settled, final. Feel the weight of that authority, resting now on your inner throne. You do not need permission to be what you already are. You need only claim it, gently and persistently, within. Every time you return to that state, to that inner knowing, you re-establish the decree. You deepen the root, you water the seed, and as the roots go deep, the fruit must come forth, not by might, nor by manipulation, but because the tree has become the thing. It no longer asks for fruit, it simply bears it, because it has no other nature. The same is true of you. Your outer world is bearing the fruit of your inner assumption, whether by design or by default. So let your design be deliberate, let your assumption be sacred, not in anxiety, but in stillness. You do not have to monitor every thought. You do not need to fix the surface. You need only return again and again to the state of the one who already is. You need only dwell in the atmosphere of your fulfilled identity until it feels so natural that anything else becomes unthinkable. And in that dwelling, you'll notice something unexpected. The striving disappears. The need to prove dissolves. You no longer reach. You remember. You no longer plead. You inhabit. And in that silent inhabiting, reality unfolds itself like a scroll, revealing what was written within you from the beginning. You were never trying to get something outside of you. You were always trying to remember what lives already within you. The desire was the invitation, not the destination. It was never about the thing. It was always about who you must become to realize that the thing is already yours. So let the surface be quiet. Let the mirror do what it does. Your gaze is no longer outward. Your gaze is inward, where all creation begins and ends. You walk not toward fulfillment. You walk from it. And the world, compelled by unseen hands, rearranges itself to reflect the one you've chosen to be. But if this is so, if the world bends to your inner decree, what then becomes of time? What becomes of delay, of waiting, of the seeming gap between the assumption and its unfolding? That question does not come to disturb you. It comes to lead you even deeper.
And so the question of time hovers like mist above still water, not demanding an answer but offering a doorway. For if you no longer strive, if you no longer wait for fulfillment, but live from it, then what is time but a shadow of your former self? What is delay, except the echo of a state you no longer occupy? You begin to see it now. Time was never the barrier. It was the reflection of your own unfolding, the measure of how long you entertained the identity of lack before choosing to remember your wholeness. The moment you return to the end, not visit it, but dwell there, time collapses inward like a closing flower. What once stretched far away is now folded inside your being. This is the hidden meaning of before they call, I will answer. The answer exists before the question forms. The fulfillment lives before the desire appears. Not because the world is fast, but because consciousness is the source. There is no gap in spirit. There is only assumption and its shadow. And yet the world seems to move in sequence. Forms take time to shift. Appearances unfold in rhythm. But now you understand. This rhythm is not delay, it is the grace of embodiment. Time allows the form to meet you gently. It lets your outer life rearrange itself without violence. It lets the new reality find you in peace. You do not fight this rhythm, you honor it. But you do not mistake it for distance. You know the only real distance is the measure of your assumption. The outer lags, but it must arrive, for it has no source outside your inner world. The moment you fully assume the end, the process is already complete in the invisible. So you stop looking for signs. You stop measuring how long it's been. You stop asking when, because to ask when is to admit you are not yet there, and you are. You have arrived. You are no longer on the road. You are the destination remembering itself in stillness. And this remembrance is not something you force. It is something you allow, like breath, like sleep. You surrender into the identity of the one who already is. And in that surrender, the walls of time begin to melt. The future bends toward you, because you are no longer casting yourself forward. You are drawing everything back into the holy now. Feel how quiet it becomes when time no longer haunts you. Feel the soft release of all impatience. You no longer watch the clock. You no longer watch the calendar. You only watch your state. Your state is the sun, and time is the shadow it casts. If the sun does not move, neither does the shadow. If you do not shift from your end, the world cannot help but follow. And yet if you feel the urge to act, you do not resist it. Action that flows from fulfillment is never frantic. It is natural, effortless, precise. You may be moved to speak, to write, to call, to walk, but not from lack, and never from fear. It comes not to get, but to express. The self that already has is free to move in joy. Let that movement be gentle. Let it be sacred. Even the smallest step, when taken from the end, carries the echo of eternity. There is no need to grasp, no need to force. Your very being is the magnet, and what belongs to you must come. It has no choice, because it was born from your word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word is not sound, it is state. The Word is I am, and whatever you attach to that sacred name becomes flesh through the law. The world will call it fate. You will call it faith. And so the days pass, but they do not matter. The seasons turn, but you remain. You walk through them as one who already holds the harvest, even while others still plant their seed in doubt. You do not measure progress. You measure only the depth of your knowing. And when that knowing is complete, all things bow to it. But there is still a greater intimacy to uncover, a deeper unfolding of the mystery, not in the outer world, but within the silence of your own divine identity. And as you rest more deeply in the warmth of your own knowing, a subtle intimacy begins to stir, not with the world, not with any form or future, but with the divine essence that breathes through you in silence. It does not announce itself. It does not arrive with thunder or sign. It simply is soft, still, eternal. And you begin to recognize that the one you've been waiting for is you, not the self shaped by the world, but the self who shaped the world by what it chose to assume. This is not metaphor, it is the deepest truth. The world is yourself pushed out, and every face, every place, every seeming delay or deliverance, is the mirror of your inner agreement. The identity you carry within is what reality reflects without. And so the sacred question arises, not as an instruction but as a remembrance. Who are you when no one is looking? Who are you when you close your eyes, when the lights dim, when the voices of the world grow quiet and only your inner echo remains? For that echo is your command. You are not waiting on God. You are the embodiment of God in motion, God in imagination, God in assumption, not a distant deity, but the infinite I am, whispered within your own being. This is the hidden pearl, buried beneath centuries of noise, that what you claim yourself to be inwardly, you become outwardly, not as reward, but as law. So when you say, I am loved, and you feel it, dwell in it, breathe from it, the world must bring you the proof, because it is not responding to your words, but to the identity you inhabit. When you say, I am free, and mean it, and walk as if it were the only truth, it becomes so, not through effort, but through reflection. And even if the outer still echoes an old state, you are not concerned. You have stopped reacting to the world, because you have remembered the source. You do not beg the mirror to change. You change your face in consciousness, and the reflection bows in reverence to your new self-image. This is the holy union of faith and identity. You are not simply hoping something will happen. You are becoming the one for whom it already has. And this becoming is not a struggle, it is a return, a homecoming. You have never been separate from the fulfillment. You only drifted from the remembrance of who you are. Now in this still space, you begin to feel it more tangibly. The peace of the one who knows, the ease of the one who no longer seeks, the joy of the one who recognizes that I am, is enough. That to assume a thing in the silence of being, is to set it into motion in the outer world. There is no fanfare, no trumpet sounds, but something has changed. The old doubts cannot reach you here. You are no longer asking whether it will come. You are dwelling in the felt reality of its presence. And in this dwelling there is rest. There is Sabbath. The inner voice becomes softer, yet more certain. It does not shout. It does not shout. It does not plead. It simply affirms what is I am. And all things bend to that name. All things come into being through that seed. I am the Lord, and beside me there is no Savior. You are beginning to understand what that truly means. So let yourself stay here, not as a practice, but as your place. The place within where all things are already finished. The place where you speak not to get, but to remember. The place where you no longer knock, because the door has already opened. And yet even now, something stirs beneath this stillness, an invitation even deeper than identity, even closer than assumption, a holy trembling that asks not only what you are assuming, but why you chose to assume it in the first place. And as that gentle question rises from beneath the surface, why did you choose this desire, this end, this vision of fulfillment? It does not confront you, it invites you inward, not to correct, but to reveal. For hidden within every assumption is a deeper truth, not about what you want, but about who you truly are, remembering yourself to be. You begin to see that no desire was ever random. Each longing was a divine whisper, coded, sacred, purposeful, not something to obtain, but something to awaken. The desire itself was never outside of you. It was a signal, a spark from your higher self, echoing down through the folds of your forgetting, calling you back to the version of yourself you are ready to embody. That's why some desires burn more brightly than others. That's why certain ends feel like home the moment you taste them in imagination, because they are not inventions, they are revelations. They are the soul recalling its own image through the mirror of experience. You did not choose the end arbitrarily. You were drawn to it because it matches the next chapter of your becoming. And faith, then, is not just loyalty to the unseen. It is loyalty to the self you are now remembering in that unseen place, the one you already are behind the veil of circumstance. This is where assumption becomes worship, where the act of living in the end is no longer about possession, but about union. You assume not to get something, but to align with your essence. You imagine not to fix what's broken, but to unveil what has always been whole. And as this deeper meaning unfolds, you feel the grip of lesser motives dissolve, the fear-based striving fades, the identity built on absence softens. You are no longer assuming from hunger, but from fullness, no longer choosing from desperation, but from resonance. You do not chase the end now, you bless it. You bless it because it called you higher. You bless it because it showed you the shape of your divine nature, waiting in the shadows. You bless it because in claiming it, you reclaim your place in the eternal pattern of all things fulfilled. And here, even desire transforms. It ceases to be a request and becomes a remembrance, not a reaching towards something far, but a turning inward to what already is. The end you see in imagination is not distant. It is encoded in your being. It comes to you as vision, because it already exists in spirit. And spirit speaks through the silent language of feeling. So you follow feeling, not as emotion, but as frequency. You attune not to what is loudest in the world, but what is deepest in your own stillness. That is where the true end lives, not in the form itself, but in the felt quality of being, the atmosphere of the fulfilled self, the one who no longer asks why or when, because they are already there. And when you rest in that atmosphere, not to get, but to be, the law takes over. The law is perfect. It does not judge your worth. It does not question your readiness. It reflects only what you are, and you in that sacred state are already whole. Let this settle. Let it root deeply. The self you assume in imagination is not fiction. It is the next unveiling of truth, and faith is the bridge between the current appearance and the eternal pattern waiting just behind it. Your loyalty to that pattern calls it forward. Call those things which be not as though they were, not to pretend, but to remember, not to trick the world, but to harmonize with your inner design. This is the holy work of assumption, not the creation of something new, but the revelation of what was before the world taught you to forget. And so the question remains, floating gently now, if you have chosen this end, not from lack, but from resonance, then what would it feel like to trust it so completely? You no longer even need its proof. And as that question begins to bloom, what if I no longer needed proof? Something loosens in you, not a giving up, but a letting go, a soft surrender of the compulsive need to verify with eyes what your soul already knows. You feel the tension drain from the unseen grip around your desire, and in its place, a quiet awe emerges, because to no longer need proof is not indifference. It is the highest form of faith.
It is loyalty without condition, devotion without delay. It is saying to the unseen reality within you, I trust you so fully, I will live as though you were already visible, whether or not the world ever catches up. And in that posture, you become dangerous to doubt, untouchable by appearances. For when your conviction no longer depends on confirmation, you have become the cause, not the effect. The light, not the shadow, the origin, not the echo. Your faith is no longer seeking, it is resting. This is the place few enter, not because it is far, but because it requires the death of needing, not the death of desire, but of dependency. You do not deny the desire, you bless it, but you rise above the craving for proof. You assume your end so fully, that it becomes your nature, not your goal. And nature does not seek, it simply expresses. Now you walk the earth as one who is no longer trying to become, but who already is. You carry the feeling of the fulfilled thing as your resting heartbeat. You don't perform it, you embody it. And in this embodiment, the law begins its silent work, undisturbed by doubt, unhindered by time. To those watching from the outside, you may seem unchanged, but within, a holy fire has taken root, a steady glowing certainty that does not flicker in the face of contradiction, because contradiction is no longer a threat. It is only old echoes dissolving as your new self solidifies. And if something does not appear right away, you do not panic, you do not plead. You smile inwardly, knowing the seed has been accepted by the soil of consciousness, and once accepted, its unfolding is inevitable. Your loyalty to the unseen has already written the end of the story. This is not arrogance, it is humility at its purest, for you have bowed to the highest truth, that reality is not out there deciding your fate. Reality is within, responding to your inner agreement. You have aligned with God by aligning with your assumption, and that is all that is ever required. Let that settle now, into the deeper chambers of your being. Let it move like soft rain through your thoughts. You no longer chase signs. You no longer pray from absence. You rest in the atmosphere of your fulfilled self, and from that rest, creation flows. This is the hidden meaning of divine timing, not delay, but harmony, not punishment, but protection. The outer world aligns when the inner has become stable, when your identity no longer wavers between hope and fear, between reaching and remembering, when you live as though it were already done, because in truth, it is. So feel what it's like now, to be the one who has. Let that feeling rise not in effort, but in naturalness. No proving, no straining, just being. You are no longer practicing the state, you are dwelling in it, and in that dwelling the world must yield. Even the cells of your body begin to listen, even time begins to bend around you, because your reality is no longer built from reaction, it is built from assumption, and assumption, sustained in loyalty, becomes form. That is law. But what if the thing you've chosen to assume is not only for you? What if your faith is carrying more than your own reflection? What if your unseen reality is writing the world for others too, in ways they have not yet dared to dream? And as that possibility unfolds within you, that your assumption may not be yours alone, but a sacred ripple across the unseen waters of others, you begin to feel the vastness of what it means to believe, not only for yourself, but for the ones who have not yet remembered how. Your faith, invisible though it may be, becomes shelter, becomes direction, becomes a hidden bridge for hearts still trembling in delay. You sense now that your loyalty to the unseen is not isolated, it is woven into the great fabric of consciousness. Every time you assume love, you create a pattern in the field that others may walk through. Every time you dwell in peace, you establish a tone that softens the atmosphere for those nearby, even if they never speak your name. Faith is never private, it is a spiritual contagion, passed from stillness to stillness, identity to identity, silently remaking the world. This is why your state matters far more than you ever imagined, not just for what it brings to your life, but for what it radiates into the collective unseen. You are not only assuming a condition, you are embodying a frequency, and that frequency, once stabilized, becomes a refuge. Others may not know why they feel lighter near you, they may not understand why hope returns after silence, but your assumption, kept sacred and unshaken, is a lamp for the many. This is what it means to let your light so shine before men, not through words, not through display, but through the quiet presence of being the fulfilled one. You do not need to speak of the end, you are the end, and your vibration carries more weight than any argument ever could. Let this wash over you, let it root more deeply than the personal, For now your desire is no longer just about your own completion, it is about coherence, harmony, the alignment of your soul with the highest pattern, so that others may feel their way home through the atmosphere you leave behind. And yes, they still have the freedom to choose. Yes, each soul must awaken by its own will. But even so, your unwavering assumption acts as invitation, as blueprint, as quiet permission to remember that all things are possible when you stop looking outward and begin living inwardly. In the end, you have seen this before, haven't you? The moment someone walks into a room full of worry, and yet carries peace so completely, the fear begins to dissolve without a word. The moment someone stands so fully in their identity, that the chaos around them forgets how to resist. This is not charisma, this is consciousness. And your consciousness, now aligned with your unseen end, does not stop at the skin. It moves like light through walls. It bends time, mends patterns, heals the unseen fractures of those who've forgotten they too are operant powers in a world that only ever reflects. You do not need recognition for this. You do not seek praise, for you know this kind of giving is not a gift from self to other. It is the self recognizing itself in every reflection. There is only one I am, wearing countless masks, and your assumption is how you bless each one. So take your desire again, not as a personal craving, but as a holy signal, and let it deepen. Let it become an offering. If I were already this fulfilled being, what would I now give to the world around me? Not from depletion, but from overflow. Not as effort, but as truth expressing itself through form. And then you'll see the miracle multiply. Not in flashes, but in quiet echoes. The friend who calls in new joy. The stranger whose path shifts. The long-held conflict that suddenly breathes open. Not because you tried to fix them, but because you assumed peace for yourself, and that peace became an open field. But if the world bends not only to your inner state, but is also subtly healed by it, what does that reveal about the true purpose of your faith? And as that realization begins to shimmer in the silence, that your faith is not only the key to your own fulfillment, but the quiet medicine of the world, a deeper humility awakens, not the humility of shrinking, but of widening, of recognizing that what you assume within yourself becomes the tone of the room, the spirit of the space, the unseen balm on wounds you'll never witness. You were never meant to keep the light only for yourself, not because you must convince or convert, but because you are the light, and light does not argue, it simply reveals. Your unseen reality, held faithfully, begins to create a world where others feel safe to believe again, safe to feel, safe to remember. So the purpose of your faith deepens. It moves beyond what you once called desire. It becomes devotion, not to form, but to presence, not to outcome, but to embodiment. Your loyalty to the unseen becomes your service, not as effort, but as existence. You simply are, and the world quietly heals around that fact. You walk now, not just for yourself, but for the many, and yet you do not carry weight. You carry rhythm, you carry stillness, you carry the fragrance of fulfillment, so familiar and soft it slips beneath the surface of others, and whispers, yes, this is real, yes, this can be yours too. For what is a world, if not a chorus of assumptions? And what is harmony, if not the returning of each soul to the frequency of the I am? You do not preach this, you live it. You do not fix others, you remain loyal to the truth that they too are already whole, already wise, already home. You assume it gently for them, not as burden, but as breath. When others seem lost, you do not grieve their journey. You see them as already found. You hold that vision, not with strain, but with faith. Not faith in their circumstance, but in the God within them, which mirrors the God within you. You meet their potential, not their problem, and in doing so, you love them into remembrance. This is why your assumption is sacred. It is the invisible altar where you worship not through words, but through identity. And as you remain in the end, not just of your own story, but of theirs, you become a witness to the miraculous rhythm of consciousness shaping itself through love. Beloved, now are we the sons of God, and it doth not yet appear what we shall be. The outer may not show it yet, but you know, you have seen beyond the veil, and you do not flinch when the world hesitates to catch up. You wait without waiting, you act without effort, you walk as one who has seen the whole, and chosen to live from its center. Feel how different this is from trying. You no longer try to manifest, you no longer seek to gather, you simply remain in the knowing, you remain in the being, you remain in the Word made flesh, not by miracle, but by law, not by chance, but by faith. And this faith, once private, has become cosmic. It stretches now beyond the boundaries of your desires. It breathes through every assumption you hold, turning your inner world into a sanctuary. And from that sanctuary, new realities are born, not because you forced them, but because you stayed loyal, stayed still, stayed in the end when it was easiest to turn back. And that staying, that quiet fidelity to the invisible, has become the holy act that ripples through dimensions you cannot yet see. But what happens when even this faith is tested, not by lack, but by abundance? What happens when the thing appears, and you are asked not to claim it, but to remain free from it?
And when it finally appears, not in imagination but in form, you are not startled, you are not overcome. The feeling is not fireworks but familiarity. The outer has only arrived to match what you've long carried within. But this too is a test of faith. Not a test of waiting, but a test of freedom. Can you hold what manifests and still remain free from it? Can you receive the thing without it becoming your identity? This is the sacred paradox that few expect. For most, the desire becomes the idol. And when it arrives, they grip it in fear, forgetting that they are not the thing, they are the consciousness that called it. You must never confuse the shadow with the light, nor the form with the source. What you see now with your eyes is not what gave birth to itself. You did, and the same power that drew this into your life can draw more, anew, again. The river does not end, because one wave reaches the shore. So you let it come, and you let it go, not from indifference, but from sovereignty. You can love the gift without needing it to feel whole. You can hold the blessing without gripping it as identity, because your loyalty has never been to appearances. It has always been to the unseen, to the felt truth that preceded form. You do not worship the reflection. You honor the face that shaped it. And that face, that self, is not bound to this moment. It is infinite. It is fluid. It is the I am behind every unfolding. And so you remain free, not only from lack, but from clinging. This is why it was written, lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, but lay up treasures in heaven. Not as a command of poverty, but as a wisdom of freedom. The treasure is your state. The treasure is your assumption. The treasure is the atmosphere within, where you can feel already fulfilled, with or without evidence. And now that you see this, you no longer fear what comes or what goes. You do not mourn the passing of old forms. You do not chase what once felt lost, because the source of all things remains within you, and you have tasted its stability. You've entered the holy place where nothing is needed, yet all is given, where creation is no longer about getting, but about expressing, where life moves through you as song, as breath, as image, and you simply let it rise and fall like waves, grateful, but not grasping. And still something deeper calls you, not from desire, but from expansion. You begin to wonder, if I am truly free, what shall I now choose? Not from need, but from joy. Not from lack, but from love. What dream would I birth, simply because it delights the divine in me, to see it dance in form? This is the next layer of creation, not reactive, but creative in its purest sense. You no longer create, because you must. You create because it is your nature. Just as the rose blooms without asking for applause, you begin to assume and express from the simple radiance of being. Let that feeling settle now. Let it fill the space within you, where once there was striving. You are not here to cling. You are here to flow. You are not here to prove. You are here to remember. And in this remembering, even the gifts of the world become like gentle visitors, welcomed, appreciated, but never mistaken for the self who summoned them. And so the question turns once more. Not who are you in lack, nor who are you in longing, but who are you in fullness, when nothing is missing, when no part of you is chasing. What does your soul then choose to imagine, simply for the joy of watching it bloom? And as that sacred invitation stirs in the silence, what shall I now imagine? Not to fill a lack, but to reflect my joy. You begin to touch the deeper rhythm of creation, no longer moved by urgency, no longer tethered to outcome. You create like the dawn paints the sky, simply because it is its nature to radiate, simply because it can. This is where faith becomes play. Not childish play, but divine play. Lila, as the mystics called it, the dance of the infinite through form. You no longer create to complete yourself. You are already whole. You create because the fullness within overflows. You are the cup that runs over, not from need, but from knowing. And so you begin to ask different questions. Not what do I want to get, but what beauty do I now feel called to reveal? Not what must I fix, but what joy can I now embody? The shift is subtle, yet seismic. You are no longer a seeker. You are a revealer. no longer reacting to the world, but birthing it anew. And this too is faith. Not only the loyalty to what you need, but the freedom to assume what delights you, to dwell in a world not of necessity, but of vision. You are not waiting for the world to give you permission. You are the voice that grants it, and so you choose, quietly, deliberately, from the deep stillness within. You let a new image rise. You feel the texture of a new end, not because you must escape the current, but because it is your nature to expand. Creation is not crisis, it is celebration. You sit in the stillness, and from it you call forth a new scene, a life made richer, softer, brighter, a state more radiant with love. And you do not ask if it is possible. You know it is already yours the moment it is felt. The law has not changed. It does not sleep. It responds always, precisely, to the assumption you hold. And because you are now creating from joy, there is no struggle, no grasping. You wear the end like a soft robe, like breath. You inhabit it as your natural dwelling, and your world, obedient as ever, prepares to echo your new tone. This is why we are told to become as little children, not to be naive, but to be free. Free from the prison of proof, free from the anxiety of how. Children assume with ease, not because they are illogical, but because they have not yet forgotten their source. They are not bound to appearances. They trust the invisible, because it feels more real than what is seen. And so do you now. You have returned to this holy innocence, not by forgetting, but by remembering. You do not lower your desires to match the world. You lift your gaze to match the unseen kingdom within. And this kingdom has no ceiling. There is no limit to what you may assume. The law does not ask if it's reasonable. It only asks if it's real to you. And what becomes real in your imagination must become visible in your world, not as a trick, but as the faithful echo of the one who assumed. Feel now the lightness of choosing again, of imagining not from lack, but from liberty, of stepping into the garden of possibility, with no agenda but love. This is the final evolution of faith. Not desperate reaching, but sacred vision. Not asking for miracles, but being the vessel through which they quietly unfold. But if you are free now to choose anything, what deeper self still awaits your recognition? What sacred identity beyond the old names, beyond the old roles, longs to be remembered through your next assumption? And as that deeper question begins to take form within you, who else could I be? Now that all the old names have softened into silence, you feel something ancient stirring, not new, but long veiled, a presence not foreign, yet rarely claimed. It is the self that exists before the story, the self untouched by circumstance, the self you were always becoming, yet already were. This is the mystery behind all desire, the call not merely toward things, but toward being. You never truly wanted the object, you wanted what the object signified, the reflection of a greater identity. And now in this soft fullness, that identity steps forward, not in thunder, but in light, not in definition, but in resonance. You no longer ask, what must I do to have? You ask, who must I remember myself to be? Because the world cannot give you what you deny within. And now you know all things flow from the assumed identity. The act of assumption is not a means to an end, it is the becoming of the end itself. So let the old labels fall away, the roles worn like garments, the names inherited through fear or habit. You are not your history. You are not your patterns. You are not even your personality. You are the one who assumes, and therefore becomes. You are the I am, clothed each moment in the feeling of your chosen reality. And what you now choose is no longer shaped by need, but by recognition. You recognize the light within yourself, and allow it to take shape. You feel the nearness of this higher self, this divine presence, not as something above or beyond, but as what has always lived beneath your surface, quietly waiting for your gaze. You feel it now as atmosphere, as tone, as stillness. It does not rush, it does not prove, it simply is. And as you align with it, not by force but by surrender, your outer world begins to mirror that same gentle authority. This is the power of faith, when it is no longer directed outward, but turned inward. Faith in the reality of your own divine nature. Faith in the identity that chooses, assumes and radiates. You no longer ask if you are worthy. You see now that worthiness was never the question. Identity was. And identity is not found. It is remembered. It is chosen. It is worn like a garment in the silence of being. Every state is yours to wear, but only one will feel like home. The one that matches your truest self. The one that requires no performance, no tension, only remembrance. And in this remembrance, all striving ends. You no longer try to match the world's expectations. You no longer shrink to fit the mirror of the past. You rise effortlessly into the image held by your own sacred imagination, and the world, faithful to its law,
rearranges to reflect your new name. Feel what that name might be, not spoken aloud, perhaps not even shaped in words, but sensed, known. The name that says, I am already all that I need to be. I am already dwelling in the end. I am already the light I once searched for. And from this identity all things are added. You are not adding to yourself. You are revealing yourself. Each assumption, each inner scene, each feeling of the wish fulfilled, is a doorway back to your divine self. And now you walk through these doorways, not to escape, but to return. But if identity is the true root of manifestation, then what becomes of the world you once feared, once chased, once tried so hard to change? And as that question begins to dissolve into you, what becomes of the world I once feared, once chased, once tried so hard to change? You feel its answer rising not in thought, but in peace. The world has not disappeared. It has simply fallen into its proper place. No longer master, no longer judge, but mirror, a silent reflection of what you dare to believe about yourself. And because your identity has shifted, so too must the image. It does not require your struggle to change. It requires only your steadiness. You stand now as one who knows the truth behind the veil. You know that life does not happen to you. It happens through you, drawn from the deep well of your assumption. So the world once feared, once resisted, becomes softer, not because it has changed its laws, but because you have changed your center. You no longer meet resistance with reaction. You meet it with remembrance. You do not try to correct the mirror. You adjust the face you wear in silence, and in this silence, everything begins to respond differently. Conversations unfold with grace. Doors open without knocking. What once felt distant comes close, not with urgency, but with rhythm. Even delays, when they appear, no longer feel like punishment. You understand now that everything bends around the vibration of your chosen self. This is why the world is not your enemy. It was never against you. It simply reflected the version of yourself you held most faithfully. And as that version changes, not once, not occasionally, but as a sustained identity, the echo must change too. So you stop demanding change from others. You no longer carry the weight of fixing. You no longer wait for circumstances to align before you feel peace. You begin with peace, and peace becomes your reflection. You begin with joy, and joy rises to meet you. You begin with love, and love appears, not as a stranger, but as recognition. And in this reversal, everything softens. What was once a battlefield becomes a garden. What was once a race becomes a walk. What was once a search becomes a remembrance. The more you dwell in the identity of the fulfilled, the more the world reveals itself as already finished. It is written, the kingdom of God is within you, not behind the stars, not in some distant future, within. And to find it is to see the world anew, not as a place to conquer, but as a canvas, waiting to reflect the art of your own becoming. And now you create not from fear, not from force, but from devotion. Each assumption becomes an act of reverence, each inner scene a quiet offering. You no longer seek to control, but to harmonize, to live in such deep alignment with the unseen, that the seen world cannot help but follow. You feel this alignment now as a frequency, a stillness, a gentle undercurrent, beneath all appearance. It is no longer effortful to return to the end. It is the most natural thing in the world. It is your native state. And every time you rest in it, you water the root of the unseen. You keep the faith. You remain loyal to the truest thing about you. Let that loyalty deepen. Let it become a rhythm. Let it become the way you breathe. And from this place, a new question begins to surface, not from fear, but from the gentle invitation of the spirit within you. If everything in the world is a reflection of who I am being, then what becomes possible when I no longer resist a single part of myself? And as that new question ripples through you, what becomes possible when I no longer resist a single part of myself? A deeper kind of quiet begins to form. Not absence, but wholeness. Not emptiness, but rest. You begin to feel the corners of yourself softening, the old thresholds dissolving, the once fragmented pieces folding into light. For all resistance is self-rejection, and all healing begins with remembrance. And what is it you are remembering now? That every shadow, every unmet need, every longing and lack, was never the enemy. It was only an echo of forgotten identity. And when you cease to war with the echo, the mirror stops shattering. You are not here to edit yourself into acceptability. You are not here to earn the right to assume the end. You are here to remember that you already are, not only the light, but the one who casts it, not only the vessel, but the flame. and the more fully you accept every part of you, even the ones you once pushed away, the more cleanly the world aligns. You begin to see now that manifestation is not about fixing, but allowing, not about climbing into some imagined perfection, but sinking into your true self, the self that needs no apology, no defense, no delay, the self that was always whole, even when the mind called it broken. And from this unconditional acceptance, something rare and powerful begins to emerge. Peace not as a product of conditions, but as a state, a stillness that no longer depends on outer changes to feel safe. You no longer wait for love to feel loved. You no longer require success to feel worthy. You simply are, and your world bends to that silent truth. You feel now the beauty of being unhurried. There is no race, there is no next level to reach, only a deeper surrender into the identity you've already assumed. You feel what it's like to rest fully, in the state of the wish fulfilled, not as effort, but as atmosphere, not as performance, but as presence. And in that presence, even the old wounds begin to glow. You look back not with regret, but with reverence. You see that every unanswered prayer, every delay, every closed door, was not a punishment, but preparation, each one gently shaping the edges of the self you now embody, the self who knows how to remain faithful without force, quiet without doubt. This is why all things work together for good to them that love God, not because the outer always pleases, but because the inner always leads. You are being led, not by conditions, but by your own assumptions. You are being shaped, not by circumstance, but by consciousness. So now you bless the former things. You no longer curse the path. You no longer divide yourself into before and after. You gather every moment into the one identity you now wear, the one who is already there, already home, already whole. And as this wholeness becomes real to you, not just as concept, but as experience, you no longer need to resist anything. The fear loses its fuel, the doubt loses its grip, because you no longer believe you must become something other than yourself in order to be free. Let that truth settle now. Let it soften you. You are not missing. You are not lacking. You are not late. You are not light. You are not wrong. You are simply waking up to what has always been true beneath the noise. And from this awakened identity, a new kind of vision begins to rise, not forced through willpower, but lifted by grace, the kind of vision that asks not only what shall I assume, but what greater good may unfold through my very being, simply because I no longer stand in the way. And as that vision begins to flicker through the stillness, what goodness could flow simply because I no longer resist who I am? You feel a quiet expansion in the space around you, as though something vast has been waiting just outside the gate of your surrender, not demanding entrance, only waiting to be received. And now the gate swings open not with noise, but with understanding. You realize now that the greatest block to the miraculous is not the lack of power, but the presence of resistance, the quiet tension of unworthiness, the hidden belief that the good you desire is somehow separate from the self you are. But as that resistance melts, so too does the illusion of separation. The end you once assumed with effort now flows through you, without boundary. And here begins the higher form of faith, the kind that does not merely create conditions, but allows heaven to touch earth through your identity. You are no longer trying to manifest a thing. You are becoming a space where love reveals itself as reality. You are no longer asking the law to serve your desire. You are letting the law move through you as fulfillment. This is the subtle shift from personal desire to divine expression, not the denial of desire, but the flowering of it. A desire freed from fear, a desire so complete in its origin that it becomes a blessing, not only to you, but to all who enter your atmosphere. And yes, your atmosphere matters. What you assume quietly, within echoes, loudly beyond you. People feel your state, even when they cannot name it. They are drawn to the harmony you carry, to the ease in your tone, to the way reality seems to fold kindly around your steps. Not because you force it, but because you have ceased to oppose it. You are now in union with your own vision, and in that union, the world bends to reflect it, not by miracle, but by fidelity. The law cannot be broken. It reflects consciousness, and consciousness is now resting in its rightful place, not in effort, not in grasping, but in peace. And so through your peace, others remember their their own. Through your stillness, others begin to quiet their inner noise. Through your assumption of wholeness, others begin to taste their own healing. You are not fixing them. You are no longer trying. You are simply being the evidence of the unseen. And this, more than anything you say, becomes the invitation. Feel now the weightlessness of this path. You do not carry the world. You allow it. You do not persuade reality. You welcome it. You do not strive for harmony. You embody it. And the longer you dwell in this sacred alignment, the more effortlessly life fulfills itself around you. According to your faith, be it unto you. Not according to effort, not according to conditions, but faith, the invisible choice to remain loyal to what the eye cannot yet see, but the heart knows deeply to be true. And the more you live in this unseen knowing, the less the seen world can contradict it. You are no longer convincing yourself. You are remembering yourself. And this remembrance changes everything. Not because the world is changing, but because you no longer need it to. Your peace is no longer at the mercy of outcomes. Your joy is no longer tethered to delay. You have found the source, and the source is you. But if peace is now your home, if wholeness is now your nature, what then becomes of the old self, the one who once waited, once doubted, once tried so hard to become?
And as you wonder what becomes of that old self, the one who waited, the one who doubted, the one who strained to earn what was already within reach, you do not feel fear, you feel tenderness, not shame but understanding. That self was never your enemy. It was the bridge, the cocoon, the shell that protected the seed while it slept. You do not cast it away, you honor it. You see how it longed to believe, even before it understood how it kept walking, even through the fog of unworthiness, how it clung to hope in the absence of clarity. That self was not a mistake, it was a prayer in motion. And now, from the stillness of your fulfilled identity, you cradle that old self in love. You no longer need to correct it. You simply release it, like a breath you've held too long. And with that release, the remnants of striving melt. The old armor softens. The narratives once worn like chains lose their meaning. Because you are not that story anymore. You are the one who remembers the story was never real. And in that remembrance, you awaken to something far more sacred than success, more enduring than proof. You awaken to innocence, not the innocence of naivety, but the innocence of alignment. The inner clarity that no longer needs to justify or argue or win. The knowing that what you are is enough because it is whole. The self you once tried to become was always waiting inside you, not as a future version, but as your original form. Your true self was not hidden behind effort. It was veiled by belief. And now the veil has thinned. You do not need to become. You need only to be, and being now is a quiet joy. No longer bound by results, no longer aching for recognition. You are not seeking anymore. You are allowing. You are not building your worth. You are resting in it. And here in this unshakable rest, the greatest shift occurs. You stop relating to yourself as the one who is transforming, and begin to relate to yourself as the one who has already become. This is not denial, it is resurrection, not escape from the past, but transcendence of it. It is written, "Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." And what is that renewal, if not the assumption of a new identity? Not through effort, but through agreement. Not by earning, but by claiming. You claim your inheritance now, not with pleading hands, but with silent knowing. You do not beg to be what you already are. And so the old self fades, not in punishment, but in peace. It is no longer needed. The version of you who lived in doubt has nothing left to defend. You have returned to the inner temple, where no part of you is in conflict, where the assumption of fulfillment is the only voice, and the echo it creates is harmony. Now the question shifts again, subtle as breath, clear as dawn. If I am no longer the one trying to become, if I am the one who already is, then what becomes possible when I live each moment as an extension of this fulfilled identity? And as that question settles into you, what becomes possible when I live each moment as an extension of the fulfilled identity? You begin to sense a kind of power, the kind that does not need to assert itself. It does not flare or demand. It moves in silence, as rhythm, as knowing, as inevitability. You no longer ask the world to confirm who you are. You carry that confirmation within, and everything you touch begins to reflect it. You walk through the same spaces, yet they respond differently. Not because they have changed, but because your inner atmosphere no longer contradicts your end. You no longer carry the vibration of striving. You no longer wait for doors to open. You are the open door, and reality flows through you as a willing servant. This is the divine gift of assumption, when it is no longer used to get, but to be. You assume the feeling of your end, and then you live as that one, not just in thought, but in tone, in gesture, in the way you pause before speaking, in the way you inhabit silence. Every action flows from the self you have already become, and what you once called manifestation now feels less like achievement and more like alignment. It no longer surprises you. It does not excite you into forgetting your stillness. It appears gently, as if remembering its place beside you, because it was always meant to arrive. Once you remembered the one who had no need to chase it, you begin to see how little needs to be done when your state is right. When your assumption is secure, the world rearranges itself without your effort. People appear, paths unfold, the timing matches your inner readiness, not your outer force. You are no longer managing reality. You are embodying the truth, and reality bows. This is why Jesus never pleaded, never persuaded. He simply assumed, and from that assumption he thanked. He moved as though the end had already been made visible, because it had first in imagination, then in form. Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, and I knew that thou hearest me always. The miracle had no power over him. It was the natural consequence of a fulfilled identity. So now, you live each moment, as if the world is already echoing your inner decree. You walk as one who has nothing to fear, and everything to give. You speak as one who no longer performs, but reveals. Even your silence is full. It vibrates with the presence of the one who has already arrived. And in this quiet mastery, even time becomes gentle. You are not waiting, you are abiding, and every moment that passes brings not tension, but confirmation. You feel no urgency to explain yourself, no pressure to produce signs. The fulfilled self has no need for validation. Its proof is in its presence. So feel this now. Let it settle over your thoughts like soft linen. You are no longer building your world from fragments of hope. You are moving through it as one who has remembered the whole. Every scene is a mirror. Every moment is shaped by your inner tone, and that tone is no longer scattered. It is consistent, faithful, true. You do not waver between what was and what could be. You remain where you have chosen to dwell, in the end, in the answered prayer, in the identity that needs no further becoming. And yet even from this stillness, something new begins to stir, not a reaching, but a rising. A subtle invitation from within. If I live as the one who already is, then what beauty, what service, what expression now seeks to emerge from me, not for gain, but for the joy of giving shape to the light within. And as that quiet impulse stirs, what seeks to emerge now, not from need, but from fullness, you begin to sense a new rhythm rising from within. No longer the beat of longing, no longer the restless searching, but a pulse of expression, gentle and radiant. For when you live as the one who already is, your life begins to pour forth without resistance, like a spring that knows no drought. You are not looking to prove, you are not reaching to impress. You are simply allowing the light within to take form, just as the tree gives fruit, not to earn the sun, but because it has been filled by it. Your faith has matured into freedom, and from that freedom, creation now flows as gift. There is no pressure here, no compulsion, only a sacred noticing, a sense that something beautiful wants to speak through you, move through you, become through you, not for recognition, not for reward, but because it is the nature of wholeness to overflow. You feel now how natural it is to give, not from lack, but from presence. You give your attention, your word, your silence, your warmth, because you are no longer trying to get, you are no longer gathering identity, you are expressing it, and every act becomes art, every choice becomes a hymn, every breath becomes a bridge between what is unseen and what is made real. This is why you were told, let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works, and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Not so the light would be worshipped, but so others might remember it is already within them too. Your life becomes a mirror, not a monument, a reminder, not a demand. And this light you shine is not effortful, it is not flashy, it does not beg for applause. It is steady, warm, invisible in its giving, like sunlight through leaves, or still water reflecting the sky. And yet it transforms everything it touches, because it comes from a place the world cannot touch. So you do not ask, what should I do? You ask, what would love do here, now, through me, as me? You ask not what action will lead to the goal, but what expression would feel most aligned with the self who has already arrived. And then you let it unfold without fear. There is no wrong step when taken from the right identity. Even the delays, even the detours, become revelations when you carry the end with you. You no longer depend on the outer to dictate your motion. You are moved from within, and the world meets you as reflection, not instruction. And the more you trust this inner movement, the quiet impulse, the sacred nudge, the more easily life expands. Your path reveals itself without demand. The right word comes, the needed resource appears, the perfect alignment unfolds, not because you managed it, but because you stayed loyal to the self for whom these things already exist. So now, your life becomes not only a fulfillment of desire, but a vessel of remembrance, a way for others to feel what it's like to walk from the end, to dwell in peace without proof, to create from fullness, not from fear. You do not speak this aloud, you do not preach it, you are it, and that is enough. But if this is true, if every moment is now a reflection of your assumed self, then what would it mean to choose even your challenges as part of the design? What would it mean to bless even resistance, as the sculptor blesses the stone? And as that question opens before you, what if I chose to bless even the resistance, as part of the divine design? A new softness enters the silence, for something in you begins to understand. Nothing along this path was ever against you, not the delay, not the denial, not even the darkness. They were the chisel, the shaping wind, the unseen hands pressing you gently into form. You are no longer afraid of contrast. You are no longer at war with appearances. You see now that the friction only reveals where your inner gaze has not yet settled, where your assumption wavers, where your loyalty leans again toward the outer. But instead of condemnation you feel compassion. You welcome the discomfort as signal, not failure, as invitation, not punishment. And this too is faith, not merely loyalty to the unseen joy, but loyalty in the face of the seeming contradiction. The moment where nothing yet appears to reflect your end, and yet you remain. The moment where the echo still carries the voice of the old self, and yet you do not flinch, because you now know what comes next. You bless the resistance, not because you enjoy pain, but because you see through it. You bless it as the final trembling before the form gives way to your new identity. You understand it now as the old pattern rising for its last appearance, not to claim you, but to be released by you. And in this blessing, you reclaim your authority. You no longer react, you respond. You no longer beg the scene to change. You embody the one for whom it already has. And this inner anchoring calms the storm more swiftly than force ever could. Even when the world forgets, you remember. Even when circumstances contradict, you return to the end. And that return is your miracle. That return is your proof. Not the outer shift, but the unshakable silence that meets the noise, and does not move. It is written, no weapon formed against thee shall prosper. Not because weapons won't form, but because you are no longer fighting shadows. You have assumed your state so deeply that nothing outside can unseat it. And that is the shield. That is the victory. So now you walk differently. You walk with grace, even through shadows. You do not rush to escape the hard moments. You let them wash through you, knowing that they too are part of the molding. They reveal the places you are still ready to rise. And you do not resist that rising anymore. You allow it. You allow it. Because you trust the law. You trust that everything, even the sharp edges, must serve the shape you have chosen to embody. And in that trust, the edges soften, the resistance releases, the conflict gives way to clarity. Feel what this means now. Feel the power of looking at a condition and saying, not with defiance but with peace, even this is working for me. Not to escape it, but to rise through it. Not to deny it, but to transmute it. This is not spiritual bypassing. This is spiritual dominion. The dominion of one who has ceased to believe in victims. The quiet might of the one who knows, I do not need to control what happens. I only need to remain loyal to who I am being. And who you are being is no longer the one who reacts. No longer the one who reacts. No longer the one who pleads. No longer the one who waits for ease before assuming peace. You are the peace. You are the ease. And now even challenge becomes
becomes the ground where your faith grows its deepest roots. But if even the resistance has served your remembrance, then what else might be waiting within the scenes you once judged as delay? And as you gently turn your gaze toward those moments you once called delay, something begins to shimmer in them, a quiet intelligence, a hidden order. What if they were never detours? What if the pauses were not punishments, but invitations? What if every seeming interruption was placed not to withhold the end, but to prepare you to become it more fully? You begin to feel it now, that in the stillness between desire and manifestation, something deeper was always at work, not outside you, within you. The delay was never in the thing, the delay was in the assumptions ripening. You may have imagined the form, but the identity that matched it had yet to take root, and so life, with mercy beyond measure, slowed the outer echo until the inner word could be made flesh. You see, the law does not rush, it does not bend to panic. It flows from precision, and precision requires alignment. It cannot deliver to the version of you who has not yet fully accepted the gift, for to receive it from the old self would be to lose it again in fear, but to receive it as the new self is to carry it without effort, without clutching, without doubt. This is the gift of delay, the time it takes to become, not in effort, but in assumption, not in action, but in identity. And when you see this, delay no longer frightens you. You do not beg for speed, you bless the rhythm. You say with calm authority, I am not behind, I am not waiting, I am becoming, and that becoming is always on time. You are being shaped by the very end you have chosen. The state you dwell in is sculpting your world with hands unseen, and what once looked like nothing happening is now recognized as everything aligning. You feel it in the silence, something beneath the surface drawing near, not because it is coming from afar, but because your vision is clearing enough to let it in. Though it tarry, wait for it shall surely come. It will not tarry. What a paradox. Wait for it will not delay. How can this be? Because when you wait from the end, you do not wait at all. You are already there. You are not watching for it. You are watching from it. And in that posture, time dissolves. The distance folds inward. The reflection catches up. So now you look again at those chapters that once seemed barren, and you find gold. You find every silence filled with instruction, every closed door pregnant with preparation, every so-called failure, a turn in the path that led you here, not to a lesser self, but to the very one who could hold the fullness without falling back into fear. And even now, if something feels stalled, if something appears resistant, you do not retreat, you do not shift your gaze, you remain, you hold your inner pose, not in tension, but in devotion. The gardener does not dig up the seed when it takes time to bloom. The sculptor does not curse the stone as they chisel. They trust what is taking shape beyond what the eye can see. So you too remain loyal, loyal not to the outer appearance, but to the inner completion. You remain in the end, not just imagining it, but dwelling in it, breathing from it, speaking as one for whom it is already done. And in this state of holy patience, your world becomes more supple, more yielding. You no longer measure progress with your eyes. You feel it, you know it, and that knowing is stronger than proof, louder than noise, more faithful than time. But if even delay is grace, if even waiting is a form of preparation, then what becomes of the future itself, once you no longer see it as something to reach, but as something already alive within you? And as that quiet truth settles deeper, that the future is not something to chase, but something already present within you, the very fabric of time begins to feel different. No longer a line stretching ahead, it becomes a circle folding inward. The end is no longer ahead of you, it is beneath your feet, rising through your spine, whispering, you are already here. The future you once strained toward was never separate, it was never hiding, it was simply awaiting your agreement, awaiting your assumption, not to arrive someday, but to be claimed now in the stillness of your inner world. And once you claim it, not through effort, but through dwelling, time begins to obey you. You are no longer moving toward fulfillment. Fulfillment moves through you. You are not walking forward into the unknown. You are returning to the known, remembered from within, shaped by vision rather than circumstance. The steps you take are no longer for direction. They are expressions of identity. And so time becomes your servant, not your master. You do not bow before the days. You do not anxiously count the hours. You know now that time is not delay, it is delivery. It carries not what you want, but what you are. And the more you remain in the end, the more time rushes to mirror your station. Now is the accepted time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. Not next week, not when it makes sense, not when all conditions align. Now, the only time that is real, the only moment in which creation ever unfolds, and you hold it in your hands, not as a fragile thing, but as your birthright. So let the mind grow quiet, let the noise about how long dissolve into this holy moment. The fulfilled self is not worried about when, it has no interest in delay, because it sees no distance, it breathes from the completed end, and in that breath, the illusion of waiting disappears. You feel this now not as concept, but as atmosphere. The future you once imagined stands with you now, looking through your eyes, guiding your speech, shaping your posture. The more you allow it, the more it becomes you, and in becoming it, the outer world bends to meet its form. You are not predicting what will come, you are expressing what already is. You are not forecasting possibility, you are living inevitability. And this shift, subtle, sacred and complete, is the essence of faith. Not blind hope, not distant belief, but trust in the unseen now. Even when the world says not yet, you say yes. Even when the senses offer contradiction, you offer stillness, and in that offering, creation obeys, not because you demanded, but because you remembered. The world reflects not your requests, but your identity, and your identity has already been declared. I am the one for whom it is done. Feel this as truth. Let it rest on your heart like morning light. There is no delay in consciousness. There is no gap in the law. There is only alignment or resistance. And when resistance ends, reality flows, not because you made it happen, but because you finally stopped standing in its way. And so the future, once imagined, becomes embodied. It loses its name. It becomes presence. The vision and the vessel are no longer two. You are not walking toward your end. You are walking as it. But if you can live from the end so completely that time itself bends, then what mystery remains about the nature of reality itself? What is this world, if it bends not to facts, but to your persistent assumption of truth?
And as that question unfolds like morning mist, what is this world, if it bends not to facts, but to the steady pulse of your assumed truth? You begin to feel the unreality of what you once called real, not as illusion, but as reflection, not as fiction, but as form-trailing spirit. The things you touched, feared, pursued, how they flicker now, how they yield to the one truth that cannot be moved. Consciousness is the only reality, not the shifting scene, not the evidence of the senses. These are shadows cast by the light of who you believe you are. The outer world holds no power of its own. It is not origin, it is response. And when you know this, you no longer attempt to rearrange conditions. You change the route. You return to the only place where causation lives, within. This is the great unveiling, that the world you thought you were in, is in you. It is shaped moment by the silent agreements you carry. Agreements about self, about others, about possibility. These assumptions, unnoticed by the distracted mind, become the code by which the world configures itself around you. And now that you see it, you cannot unsee. The mirror has no will of its own. It does not offer praise or punishment. It only reflects. And so, you no longer beg the image to change. You turn instead to the unseen sculptor. You turn inward, to the I am. Let this knowing rest in your chest like breath. Let it slow your pulse. You are not here to fix the reflection. You are here to remember the light that casts it. You are not here to argue with facts. You are here to assume the deeper truth, and let that truth reframe the scene. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Righteous not in morality, but in alignment. Judgment not as critique, but as selection. You are selecting the unseen reality you will remain loyal to, and the world must conform, not because you force it, but because it is law. You feel this now as a quiet power. You need not raise your voice. You need not defend your claim. You simply remain in the state, and let the world echo. If it does not match today, it will tomorrow. If it does not bend this hour, it must in the next. Your only task is faithfulness to the state, not perfect thought, but steady identity. And as your identity stabilizes, the outer world becomes fluid. People shift, circumstances rearrange, events align, not through coincidence, but through correspondence. You do not make them happen. You let them happen by refusing to leave the end you've chosen. So what is this world? It is the evidence of who you have dared to be in silence. It is your reflection, your echo, your canvas. And when you change your conception of yourself, the world must catch up. It has no choice. The reflection is bound to the face. You are no longer the victim of what is. You are the author of what appears. You may not have known it before. You may have allowed old assumptions to linger unchallenged. But now, with eyes inwardly open, you write again, not with pen or plan, but with feeling. You assume the truth you wish to see. You become the one for whom it is already done, and the outer must follow. Slowly, softly, or all at once, it must. Because what is seen was first felt. What is experienced was first imagined. What is now, was once assumed. And if this world is truly your mirror, then what new identity are you now ready to see reflected? Not one born of fear, or need, or delay, but one rooted in divine remembrance, glowing with the still joy of one who has already arrived. And as that new identity stirs softly within, the one not born of striving, but of stillness, you feel the air around you respond, not with noise, but with a hush, as if the whole world is listening for who you now agree to be. For creation always listens, not to words alone, but to your inner posture, to the tone of being you hold without effort, to the mood of the heart you wear like breath. This is the silent covenant between you and the unseen, that as you see yourself, so shall it be done unto you, not as punishment, not as reward, but as reflection. The world does not wait for your permission to conform, it waits for your embodiment. And once you dwell in the state of your desired end, the outer must bend to it, quietly, faithfully, inevitably. But hear this deeply. It is not your desire alone that shapes reality. It is your assumption that you are already the one who has received. The secret is not wanting, it is being. The law responds not to desperation, but to fulfillment. Not to the words I hope, but to the breath that says I am. And so, what is identity, if not the assumption you choose to remain loyal to? Not as performance, not as pressure, but as inner agreement. When you no longer negotiate with the old self, when you cease returning to the doubts that once fed your delays, the new self is revealed, not built, but uncovered. Like a sculpture released from stone, your true form appears as you drop what you are not. This is why revision works, why inner conversation reshapes experience. You are not changing the past, you are re-identifying with the version of self who never left the end. And that version becomes dominant, not through force, but through surrender. You surrender to the new self by refusing to return to the old reactions. Feel it now, that subtle threshold. The space between reacting as you once did, and responding as the one who has already arrived. This is the holy ground. This is the creative act. Not what you do when life is easy, but who you choose to be when it is not yet yielding. That choice, quiet, private, unwavering, is the birthplace of miracles. You no longer beg the world to see you. You let it catch up to what you already are. You no longer repeat the story of limitation. You speak now from wholeness, from peace, from completion. And this shift is not loud. It is not dramatic. It does not need to be, because truth does not perform. It simply is. He calleth those things which be not as though they were, and in doing so he makes them real. This is not fantasy. It is divine fidelity. You are not deceiving yourself. You are aligning yourself. You are tuning your inner world to the unseen reality that longs to express itself through you. And now, as this identity takes root, you feel less need to prove, less urge to explain. You become the quiet one in the room, who already knows the outcome. You walk through the world as if the invisible is more solid than the visible, because it is. And when you rest in that knowing, fear begins to dissolve, urgency fades, time loses its grip, because the one who already is, has nothing left to chase. There is no strain in living as what you already are. There is only devotion. There is only remembrance. But if identity is only ever assumption, then who were you before the assumptions began? What ancient self still waits, silent and whole, behind every image you've ever worn? And as that question whispers through the quiet, who were you before assumption clothed you in story, a deeper stillness rises, something older than memory, more intimate than thought. You feel it not as a voice, but as a hum, beneath every name you've worn, every role you've played. The pure formless self that does not seek to become, because it already is. Not the self of biography or narrative, but the eternal I am. The one before desire, before identity, before the mirrors of the world began to reflect something back. And though you may have forgotten it for a time, it has never moved, never changed, never left. This is the root of all assumption. the wellspring of all states, the I am that gives life to every form you dare to wear. Before you assumed the role of lack, you were this. Before you imagined success, you were this. Before you tried to become anything, you simply were. And that original being, still holy, untouched, is the one who assumes, not the mind, not the personality, but the awareness behind both. This is why all manifestation begins in stillness, why the law works not through repetition, but through acceptance. You cannot force the law, you can only return to the I am, and choose anew. From that sacred place, you say I am loved, and the world begins to echo. You say I am chosen, and people, places and provision rearrange. Not because you added something, but because you uncovered what was buried beneath noise, beneath doubt, beneath years of mistaken identity. You now begin to understand why silence is power, why the greatest shift does not require effort, but recognition, to withdraw from all the masks, not in rejection, but in reverence, to lay down the need to fix, and simply abide as the one who has already remembered. Let this be your temple now, not built with passion, but with awareness. Enter not with striving, but with surrender. And there, in the stillness between breath and thought, find again the one who needs no proof to believe. The one who trusts the unseen, not because it is logical, but because it is home. You do not need to know how it will unfold. The I am does not concern itself with method. It is cause. It is origin. And when you dwell in it, you move beyond cause and effect. You live in creation itself, not reacting to life, but birthing it. From this place, assumption is no longer an act of will. It becomes a natural extension of your true nature. Like a seed releasing its fruit without strain, you assume not to get, but because it is already true. And the moment you feel the truth of your being, the outer world begins its quiet obedience. Be still and know that I am God. Not know about God, not seek for God in the sky, but be still, and know, feel, recognize, remember, that what you have called God has always been your own I am, not separate, not distant, but the very awareness now listening, now choosing, now creating. And the more you abide in this knowing, the less effort remains, the less doubt can breathe, the less you look outward for confirmation, because the one who knows no longer watches. They rest, they radiate, they assume. But if the I am is the root, if this silent presence behind all assumptions is the true cause, then could every outer form you seek be only a shadow of something far more luminous, waiting to be felt from within. And as that light begins to break through, the possibility that every form is but the echo of an inner radiance, you feel the sacred reversal, that what you once chased outside was never the source. It was only the afterglow, a faint reflection of something deeper than vision, more real than touch. You no longer reach toward the image, you turn to the flame that casts it. This world, with all its shapes and shadows, is not solid. It is obedient. It bends not to effort, but to essence. And when you shift the essence of self, the shadows reassemble. They change costume, they change tone, but they remain what they have always been, echoes of your assumption. So you no longer treat the outer as substance. You no longer give it the throne. You walk past appearances with the quiet confidence of one who knows the truth lives deeper. You do not shout at the mirror. You do not paint over the reflection. You enter the secret place and change the face. The secret place is not hidden in some distant realm. It is not reached through rituals or heights. It is simply stillness, awareness, the pause where identity is chosen, the pause where you say, this is who I am, not because the world agrees, but because your inner knowing says so. And from that pause, you feel the world begin again, this time not from fear, not from need, but from fullness. You see love, not as something to earn, but as something you are. You feel abundance, not as something to possess, but as something you assume. You move not to acquire, but to express. This is the mystery the world cannot grasp, that nothing real can be added to you. All things are drawn from you, shaped by the mold of your state. And the state is not an effort of mind, it is a saturation of being, a felt knowing, a sacred agreement made in silence. According to your faith be it unto you, not according to effort, not according to worthiness, but according to your inner loyalty to what is unseen. Your faith is the measure of what you accept as real, without evidence. And once accepted, the evidence appears, not to convince you, but to keep up with you. Feel this truth settle in. You are no longer trying to make things happen. You are letting the world rearrange itself around the one you have remembered yourself to be. And this remembering, it is not loud, it is not announced, it is the still rebirth of self,
in the furnace of imagination. The world may not understand. It may ask for plans and proofs. Let it ask. Let it spin. You rest in the inner temple, where your assumption walks ahead of you, preparing the way. You rest in the knowing that what you feel is true, repeatedly and without resistance, becomes the world you walk through. And the longer you abide in this end, the more natural it becomes. It no longer feels like pretending. It no longer feels like pretending. It no longer feels like reaching. It feels like home. The outer must catch up. It must obey, because assumption is the true substance, and the unseen is the womb of the seen. You begin to smile at delay. You no longer fear the in-between, for you know now it is not a question of if, but when. And when bends to the one who bends not, when yields to the one who is. But if all outer form is only ever trailing behind inner faith, then how much of your world right now is simply the momentum of forgotten assumptions waiting to be revised? And as that question ripples through the quiet, how much of what you see is merely the echo of what you once assumed? You begin to realize that many of your present conditions are not decisions made now, but reflections of beliefs long left unchecked, like old seeds still bearing fruit, though forgotten, like shadows that linger from a light already turned. The world around you is not new unless you are. It does not offer originality, only repetition of the dominant inner agreement. What you are loyal to in imagination must reappear in experience, for that is the law. Not sometimes, not if conditions allow, always. This is not fate, it is fidelity. You are always faithful. The question is to what? And when you see this, not as burden but as blessing, you reclaim your inheritance. You stop trying to fight conditions with effort, and begin to trace them back to their root consciousness. You withdraw power from the external, and give it back to the place it has always truly lived within. Even the patterns you feel trapped in were once authored by a belief, not by punishment, not by check, but by the silent vote of your inner attention. And attention, over time, becomes assumption. What you continually dwell upon, you become, not by effort, but by embodiment. So now you look not to the world for confirmation, but to the self for correction, not to blame, but to bless, not to fix, but to revive. You bless the moment as the final echo of an old self, and you breathe new life into being, not through force, but through fidelity. This is why revision is sacred, why inner speech is holy, because every time you recall a moment, and see it differently, not as victim, but as creator, you dissolve the weight of what was, and replace it with what always could have been. And that revision, though seemingly quiet, alters the course of what follows. You are not at the mercy of the facts, you are the author of the frame, and what you reframe with love becomes a new seed, plotted in the garden of the unseen. Soon it must rise, for no word, no image, no state, sincerely assumed, can remain without effect. Even now, reality is shifting, not because the outer changed, but because you turned your gaze inward and chose again. You chose to no longer carry what was untrue. You chose to see through the lens of the I am, rather than through the wound of the past. And that choice, though silent, rings louder in creation than any outward act. Let this bring you peace. You need not undo what has been. You need only remain loyal to what now is in consciousness. Your present assumption is stronger than your past belief, for the Lord does not remember time. It remembers only what is held as true now. Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. Behold, I am doing a new thing. This is not forgetting as denial. This is forgetting as release. A letting go of the tether between you and the lesser self you no longer serve. You are not bound to live again what you have revised. You are free. And as you walk forward in this remembrance, you find the unseen becoming more familiar than the seen. You find your inner world more vivid than the outer. You begin to live from the invisible, not just believe in it. And that, beloved, is faith. Not a hope, not a waiting, but a knowing that rests. But if your present world is only ever the echo of old faith, then what wonders might appear if you now choose to remain loyal only to what brings light? And as that invitation begins to open, what would life become if you gave your full loyalty to only the light within? Something begins to stir, not from ambition, but from peace. Not to make something happen, but because it already has. You begin to walk not as one seeking proof, but as one revealing the truth already chosen in silence. The unseen is no longer a mystery to you. It is your dwelling place, your sanctuary, your foundation. What once felt intangible now feels like the very substance of your being. It is no longer your belief that creates your world. It is your identity, and your identity is love remembering itself. You are no longer asking how or when or why. You are resting in the deep holy rhythm of I am, not as a phrase, but as a presence, not as an affirmation, but as a flame. You are no longer seeking evidence of your assumption. You are the evidence, the walking, breathing result of inner fidelity. To those who look upon you, the world may seem unchanged, but with it, you have passed through the veil. You have crossed from effort into ease, from hope into knowing, from theory into law. And the world, like obedient clay, is catching up. And though you may not speak of it often, the change is visible in the way you no longer react, in the way you pause before a thought becomes a seed, in the way your inner conversations lean toward peace, even when no one is listening, especially then. This is the power few ever claim, not because it is hidden, but because it is quiet, gentle, unimpressive to the eyes that crave spectacle. But those with ears to hear and hearts to feel know it as the only true power. The silent loyalty to what is not yet seen, but already known. For faith is not noise, it is not desperation, it is not pleading with God, but walking as God. It is not begging reality to shift, but becoming the state in which that shift is inevitable. And this you now know, is the fulfillment of all scripture, the end of all seeking Christ in you, the hope of glory. So you dwell now in that upper room, not above the world, but within it, awake. You dwell in the secret place of the Most High, not as a guest, but as heir. You breathe not to survive, but to create. You rest not because the world is perfect, but because you are. And in that rest, all things unfold, without struggle, without delay, without fear. Not because you made them happen, but because you no longer stood in their way. You became the state, and the state became flesh. You are not the dreamer chasing the dream. You are the dream remembered. You are not the seeker following signs. You are the sign, the echo of a deeper yes made long ago in the quiet before time. And now, that yes has become your life, all that remains is to remain, to return again and again, not with effort, but with ease, not with striving, but with stillness. For you are not trying to create a new world, you are awakening to the one that has always waited within you. Let the outer unfold as it must, let the old dissolve where it will. You are no longer loyal to appearances, you are loyal to the unseen, and that loyalty, pure, consistent, quiet, has made you free. So now, with the gentleness of one who has remembered, you open your eyes. The world greets you not as something separate, but as your own reflection, and you smile, not because all is done, but because all has begun, again from within. And in the silence, a final whisper, it is done unto you as you have believed, and it is, and it is, and it is.